I call to order the May 6, 2020 business meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Education. We welcome everyone and request everyone in our audience to please silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Let's cite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Present.
Ms. Bolton? Present. Mrs. Bowers?
Here.
Mr. Lindy?
Here.
Mr. Messer?
Present.
Mr. Morosky?
Here.
President Jones?
Here. Thank you. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the business meeting April 22nd, 2020, special meeting April 22nd, 2020, special meeting April 27th, 2020, and the business meeting April 27th, 2020.
So
moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes are approved as presented. Okay, Ms. Bowers, as chair of the Student Achievement Committee, please present the May 1st, 2020 committee meeting report.
All righty. During our STAC committee on May 1st, our only focus was really to talk about the next steps for reviewing the evaluation for the current evaluation for the superintendent. And the committee reported that the superintendent's evaluation has been completed by all board members, and that the board, the committee actually is requesting that the board review those evaluations together, the results of those together. And so we are in the process of doing that. And Mr. Morosky noted that some of the measures in evaluation would not be met, which we all kind of came to an agreement and discussion due to the changes to state law and the changes in the state testing. We also commented on the measures that would not be measured this year because of the changes with COVID-19. The other topic, or the additional topic, was the evaluation for 2021. And the committee discussed, and we're looking at the current evaluation measures, and we had discussion, and we were all in agreement about trying to streamline down the number of outcome measures. And we talked about and agreed upon the 5 goals as being the overarching goals for the strategic plan and the guide to help to determine the measures that will help be specific for our superintendent evaluation for next year. And so what was presented and requested by the superintendent, which we all agreed to, was for the superintendent to have what's called a check-in post throughout the year. And I believe the timeline, and other board members, I hope you guys received this from Mr. McDowell today. Did you see the timeline that he sent regarding what was discussed in the SAC meeting? Like June is actually the time to plan and create the next evaluation. And then October is being the first check-in to seeing, because I think the superintendent felt that she needed, and we all agreed that she needed a post-check to see how she's doing. And Paul suggested September, and I think I suggested the end of first quarter, which is really October, to do a check-in to see if we're on the right, if she's progressing and the district is progressing on the right track. And then of course February is her regular evaluation, and then doing another check-in in April going forward, and then June being again our start date to look at the evaluation for the next year. There were some concerns from Mr. Morosky that he got feedback from the community around the amount of information and check-ins that teachers have to do. And I think we might talk about some of that today more in depth. The superintendent agreed to look into that because I think it was a request, if not from the board overall, from maybe one person we were talking about accountability wanting to make sure that teachers were connecting with families and making sure that they actually were interacting with the students. So at the next step committee, our objective would be to actually review some of those proposed streamlined outcomes and kind of sift that out and get through that to see what the next year's evaluation outcome measures will be. Any other comments from our committee?
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Do board members?
Ryan.
Oh,
I'm
Ryan,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I may be off your screen, just depending on how it's laid out. But, I just think this was a great conversation in that, we're starting to even see another layer of pull through to our strategic plan. And, if we align on those are our critical success factors and, those work streams that we had the people here on the board and people throughout the committee, et cetera, we should then drive accountability starting with our superintendent all the way through the organization in moving in heaven and earth to address those. That being said, we also then said, but these are unprecedented times, so you have to have that flexibility and the ability to have those check-ins. So yes, we want to stay connected to the strategic plan, but also be cognizant of what's being required today is not normal, so we just need to build that in and have those that flexibility too.
Thank you. Any additional committee board member comments? Okay. Do board members have questions or comments? Mr. Lindy?
Thanks, Carolyn. I wanted to share a couple things. I think the pulse check idea sounds really, really great. And I love the idea that it sounds like 3 or 4 times a year, Laura will get a chance to align with the board on how things are going. I think that sounds just fantastic. Thank you. I wanted to just reiterate, I appreciate having had the chance to talk with Carolyn and Pam and Laura about this earlier, that I want to advocate as effectively as I can that for the 2021 school year, there's a much smaller number of outcomes on Laura's scorecard. I think if we look at the number of outcomes that are on there for this year, the 1920 school year, I think it's too large a number for any human being to keep track of or focus on. I think there's a limit to how many things one person can focus on at a time. And I love the idea of aligning the goals to the strategic plan. I think that makes great sense. I think the push I wanted to offer was that in each of those five categories, we challenge ourselves to get the goals down to 1 to 3 per category. That would create a maximum of 15 different outcomes. 15 still feels like a lot, but all 5 of those really are important. And I certainly understand how you need more than 1 in each category. But I think what challenging ourselves to come to a very small number will do is force alignment around what's most important. And I think if we can do that, it'll set Laura and her team up to go after it in a really effective way. And so that was one piece. 2 other ones. I hope that it's my first time through this process, but I hope as we go through it, we can have conversations about what the targets are and why Laura and her team thinks that they're at the sweet spot of what's ambitious, but what's feasible. I want us to go after things that really matter, but I want us to go after things that we really have a reason to believe we can win on if we do it right. And then the last piece I wanted to share was in thinking back on the mid-year update this year that Laura and her team shared, there was a mix of outcomes where we had really good mid-year indicators and outcomes where there wasn't really a mid-year indicator because we weren't going to know till the end of the year. I think the last challenge I wanted to offer the group is that for us to approve a goal on Laura's scorecard, we got to have something middle of the year we can look at to know whether or not it's on track or not. And so just to summarize, I think I'm very excited about this discussion. I think it matters a lot because it forces strategic clarity. I want to challenge us to get the goals down to 1 to 3 per category, that they be at the nexus of ambitious and what's feasible, and that for anyone that goes on there, there's a clear lead indicator that we can look at midway through the year to know whether or not we're on or off track.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to remind, and thank you, Mr. Lindy, but and good, but your points are well taken. But I want to remind folks, we're for the committee report, we've heard the report. We are going to set aside some time to have this very discussion where we can again put these points out for discussion. So, it is noted. And so we'll go to Mr. Morosky first and then Mr. Messer.
I was just going to kind of reiterate what Mr. Lindy was saying. And the conversation we had with those 5 areas was you recommended, the number 3 for 15 total sub areas. I would say even just 1 or 2 in some regard, because, superintendent has her team that owns all those subheadings of all those. And that's kind of what we talked about a little bit in SAC as well. So just that conversation, it resonated with me when you were saying that. So that was the only piece. I just want to put a pin in that.
Thank you, Mr. Messer.
Yes, and similarly, I think just we're all on the same page. Exactly what you just kind of talked through is the same conversation we had, which is getting it from 30, 34, whatever the number was, down to mission critical. And I definitely think less than 15. I think 5 to 10 is kind of where we had set our mind, and then and then having lead indicator. We did have that same conversation. It's kind of an on track, off track that we can kind of see how we're coming along, and we owe that to every employee throughout the district on where they are throughout the year, not just wait till the end. So I think we have full alignment on all that.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Hello.
So,
Yeah,
sorry. Ms. Bowles, sorry.
Yeah. I think everything's good. I think the SAC committee will do the work. Not all of us, but all of us can contribute to what they're going to do, and I think they're in the right direction. One thing about limiting, I think it's very wise to limit it. It's usually the superintendent that wants to be held accountable for so many things. It's not necessarily the board wanting her to be held so accountable for so many things. I would just put 2 caveats into it, and I know we can discuss this when we go over her current one and the scores that she achieved. I think it would be important to hold the superintendent strictly to superintendent responsibilities. There's so many things on that evaluation that really are the people that work within her team that have to be held accountable for some of that stuff. And I just think there's only one superintendent. There's certain things that only that superintendent can really achieve. And I know that it's based upon the success of the folks that work within her team and all the way through the board. But I would like us to think about what really is the superintendent's responsibility. And I would also say that we are very heavy on instructional achievement. And that's just as a culture thing for Cincinnati Public. But in this time, being a change agent and a visionary is going to be just as critical as whether or not the AP scores go up or down. So just something to think about as we start to change the culture. We don't want to diminish student achievement and growth, but the reality is those are things that many people achieve, but there are only a few things that a superintendent can lead us through. So that might be one way I'd be thinking about limiting it. But, we have that overachiever in the superintendent, and she likes to be held accountable for a lot of stuff.
Okay, thank you. I think all these points are well taken, and I certainly agree that it sort of fits where the direction that we're going in terms of our future planning and looking at how things would be different and how we transition. So, I know we're all looking forward to having that discussion about the evaluation. And Ms. Bowers, I'm going to ask you to let me know for sure, when, on which upcoming agenda you want to have that on so we can write that in. Okay. All right. Okay. So yes, Ms. Bowers, did you have a comment?
Say that again. Yes, say that again.
I was just reminding you to let me know to confirm which upcoming meeting you want to have this discussion about her evaluation.
The current
Right?
evaluation? The current evaluation?
Yes.
May 20th. May 20th.
20th? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I need a motion to accept the committee minutes as written.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved as presented. Thank you. Does anyone have any kudos?
Oh,
Yes, Ms. Bowers.
all right. I have a few kudos for. There was a kindergarten readiness transition panel that was on Facebook the other day, and I want to give kudos to Principal Solomon Gray from Cheviot, who was one of the panelists. Also, Principal Simpson from Pleasant Ridge Montessori was a panelist, and Principal Sipple from Fairview German, talking about each unique way that the schools, on top of some other community schools, that were actually talking about kids getting ready for kindergarten and how each school uniquely prepares and engages the community. And I would also like to give a shout out to Superintendent Mitchell and Deputy Superintendent Amat, who were on the COVID-19 town hall panel discussion for the Black community. And they did an excellent job being transparent, explaining all of the ways that we're engaging our families. Superintendent talked about changing from the old norm and what it looks like to come back to school, what could happen, what we're looking at, and I think they did an excellent job explaining that to our community. So kudos to all of them.
Thank you. Any other kudos? Okay, Ms. Bates, please present the retirements. We can't hear you,
Can't hear you,
Melanie.
Melanie.
Unmute.
Here I am.
Okay.
Okay. Retirements from our certificated personnel. Mary Rose Common, Mary Jo F. O'Connell, Glenn G. Schulte, and from our civil service personnel, Darlisa Anderson, Denise Bobo, Nancy Ellington, and Susan Lips. We congratulate them on this, on their retirements, and we thank them for their service to our children.
Thank you, Ms. Bates. Okay, we are now at the item on our agenda for hearing the public. The board prides itself on being as transparent and open as possible. Consistent with the state's direction to minimize public gatherings, we are convening this video conference call to include opportunity for public comment. Here are the specific instructions for participation in hearing of the public. To speak, you will need to send a request by clicking on the hand icon on your screen. Mac and iPad users are able to access the raise hand icon located on your device. Once the request has been granted by Treasurer Wagner, you will receive a notice on your screen. Click yes to go interactive. If you do not want your video active, please disable the video camera icon. After speaking, you will briefly see the welcome screen again as you transition back to the live stream meeting. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak, and Mrs. Wagner will be our timekeeper. When the buzzer goes off, your 3 minutes are up. Please refrain from discussing any personnel items. Okay, Ms. Wagner, do we have any requests to speak?
We do. We have Mr. Craig Rosen.
Okay, Mr. Rosen? Okay, not sure what's going on.
Let me give him. He's been accepted as a presenter, so he just needs to accept it and then unmute.
Okay, I
Looks like-
see.
looks like he was-
There is. Okay. Mr. Rosen.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to participate in your meetings. First off, I just want to thank our district's teachers. They have been amazing for we've been in quarantine. Children have been struggling. They're doing great because of their teachers. Second, I also want to thank the board for holding fast to the community reinvestment agreement and signing the 33% with the city, especially now given our, it's going to be critical to get from the city goes forward. My question is, given the Governor DeWine's announcement yesterday of dramatic cuts to the school funding formulas for Ohio districts, I can't imagine how it's going to impact our budgets going forward. It's a large pill to swallow. And so I'm curious, what can we as parents, community members, and supporters of the school district do to support the administration and the board as you go through these difficult times to try and figure out where these
I'm not sure. I think we lost the audio.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, the question is, given Governor DeWine's announcement yesterday of dramatic cuts to school funding formula, what can we do as parents and supporters of the school district to help you as a board and the administration positive way?
Oh, okay. I know we typically, Mr. Rosen, we typically don't respond to questions. This is a straight hearing of the public, not a Q&A. But just so we're clear, we were informed, and I believe that at some point during this meeting, that the plan is to address that very generally. So if you could just please defer, and we'll make comment about it a little later.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have nobody else with their hand raised.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any other speakers, we'll move on to our presentations. Superintendent Mitchell, please introduce this afternoon's presentation.
Oh, somebody just popped in.
Sorry. Oh, somebody just.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Superintendent.
And this is Miss Sarah Stitzline. She's been accepted, so she has to accept it and then come over.
Ms. Stitzline, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Wonderful. Thanks to each of you for all of your hard work through this most challenging time. I'm asking a request for, I guess, feedback and guidance as chair of the LSDMC at Sands Montessori in Mount Washington. I've been in touch with several of the chairs from the LSDMCs over in our general part of town, and we're just hoping to get some guidance from the board and the district about what we should be doing as LSDMCs at this time. We simply don't know basics about platforms to be using for our meetings in order for those to be as open and public as possible, things like Blue Jeans. We're not sure how to be supporting our schools kind of from afar and from without. So we're hoping that perhaps someone at the district office could provide us some support and guidance so that we can be serving our schools to the best of our abilities.
Okay, thank you. We do have you recorded. We'll make sure that someone gets in contact, that somebody from administration will get in contact with you around. Oh, okay. Rather than do that now, I see Miss Murphy just popped up, but if we could have Miss Murphy just follow up with her after this meeting, not during the meeting. Thank you. Okay, any other speakers?
I believe we have Ms. Sellers on the line. It's hard to tell because it's just a bunch of letters, but
Ms. Sellers, are you there? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Ms. Wagner, okay.
she's on. Hold on.
Okay, all righty.
Unmute yourself, Julie.
Hello. Can you hear
Hello.
me? Hi.
Yes.
I just want to talk to the board, and I don't know how many of you are aware that with the COVID-19, the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers has set up a task force. We have been doing research, and it's very detailed. We had a task force of 15 people who had 12 subcommittees, and they were representative of many different areas within the district. There were representatives for the arts, for early childhood, high school, elementary, ESL. We had people who were talking about facilities and areas of concern for teachers to make sure that they are entering the schools when they reopen in the safest environment possible. I am happy that the district, we have created a document with over 525 teacher representatives who responded to our survey. And we also had every one of the subcommittees who were chaired by CFT members had 10 people who were not officers or elected officials within CFT on the task force. So we literally have, we've had over 100 people actively involved with the subcommittees. We've had a lot of input. And I just want to say that we will release it on Friday after our final edit and edition, and the executive council votes on the final edition. We will be sending that to everybody on all the school board members and everybody in leadership so that they can see the resolution that we will have passed. It will be for how are we going to move forward and reopen our schools so that our community and teachers and employees feel comfortable and open about this. I know that the district they are having committees where they are going to be opening this up. They're going to have more representatives, and I hope that the elected representatives from CFT, which is 4 members, will be able to serve on this committee. It's really important that CFT we've probably put in cumulatively over 1,000 hours. We've taken this very seriously, and that we want to make sure that everybody, when they re-enter the schools, that there is a policy, there is protocol, there's procedures, that people from school A through school Z have the confidence that they are entering the buildings in the safest working conditions possible, so that all students will be safe, and that we will have teachers and employees in the buildings who are safe so that we can minimize the spread of COVID within CPS. I hope that as we move forward, that we will have the confidence and trust of the district, employees and teachers, and also that we will have the trust of the community that they know that their children will be returning to school in as safe of conditions as possible. That's all I would like to say right now, but I'm excited about moving this committee forward, and I hope that CFT will have fair representation within the committee.
Thank you. Any other speakers, Ms. Wagner? Okay. Thank you. So, okay, so now we're ready to move on to our presentations. Superintendent Mitchell.
Yes, so thank you, Board Member Jones. So this is my second favorite time of the school year. My first is when school opens and you walk through schools and you can smell those crayons and markers. And then the second favorite time is the end of the year when we salute our graduates through a graduation as well as through recognizing our valedictorians and salutatorians. And so tonight is just that night to celebrate our kids. If you can imagine, when they started this school year, they were so excited about this year, thinking about prom and graduation and spring break, as well as spring field trips. And so a lot of those things didn't happen. And so I'm very excited and very happy, though, that we'll be able to recognize them and celebrate them, because this is a very special time for them in terms of the time of year, but it's also a very special time in their lives and their family lives. So we've invited their family members to watch this broadcast so that they can see and hear their child's name called. And so I'm going to turn it over to Shauna Murphy, our Assistant Superintendent over Secondary Education, to introduce this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Mitchell. It is my absolute honor and privilege, this best time of the year, to take a moment to recognize and honor those who have worked so hard to get our seniors to this moment in time, and to especially recognize them for their hard work over their pre-K-12 experience. Tonight, you're going to meet young people who have worked so hard, and they are on their way to becoming pharmacy techs, to becoming engineers, to becoming people who excel in the fine arts, everything that we've prepared them for in this Beyond the Tassel series. You'll also have an opportunity tonight to hear about the academic excellence from our college manager, Ms. Kayla Ritter-Rickles, as she shares great information about scholarships our young people are receiving tonight. So I'll get out the way so that you can see the video of our valedictorians and salutatorians.
Wow.
done.
I loved it. I just loved it.
Hi, board members. Thank you for having me. I'm Kayla Ritter-Rickles, and I serve as the college manager in our district. And today I'm excited to piggyback on the Val and Sal presentation to give you an update on our scholarship partners. In such an uncertain time in education, there are many exciting things to celebrate, namely the achievements of the class of 2020 and the partners that are eager to welcome them as members to their community in the fall. As we work to ensure that each graduate has a 3E pathway, colleges have uniquely partnered with Cincinnati Public Schools in a variety of ways. And these commitments not only support our students as individuals, they also continue to showcase that Cincinnati Public School graduates are desirable and influential members of the fabric of our post-secondary institutions. So today, I bring you the annual scholarship partner update. We want to recognize 8 partner programs that support our graduates and celebrate a new commitment to Cincinnati Public Schools. So first, I'd like to showcase to you the class of 2020 Ohio State University Young Scholars. We have 5 bright minds from 4 different CPS high schools that will matriculate to Ohio State University as part of this program. A longstanding commitment to Cincinnati Public Schools and the other urban districts in the state of Ohio, this commitment results in an annual scholarship of over $28,000 per student per year. And a unique aspect of this program is that students engage as early as 8th grade as an opportunity to be exposed and aware of college and get on track to a college-ready curriculum in high school. For students that maintain eligibility and wish to attend Ohio State, they receive a generous scholarship, as mentioned, and it typically covers the full cost of attendance, and they'll be deeply supported by Ohio State University upon arriving on campus as full-time students. Next slide, Sarah. We have similar commitments at other institutions as well, and so I'm going to cover some of those commitments and what that looks like for this year's graduates. This year, Miami University in Oxford has offered 16 full cost of attendance scholarships to Cincinnati public students. As of today, 6 students have accepted this award from 5 different CPS schools. The dollar commitment is over $28,000 per year per student and does cover books, tuition, and housing on campus. The Art Academy of Cincinnati has offered 2 full tuition scholarships to Cincinnati Public Class of 2020 graduates, and 1 has been accepted so far by Maya Daniels at Dater High School. The University of Dayton has offered 2 Flyer Promise scholarship spots that are exclusive to Cincinnati Public School students, and Ryan Q of Dater High School has accepted 1 of these awards so far. For these scholarships, students have until June 1st to accept these college awards, and we expect the number to grow. As you can imagine, these high-achieving students have lots of opportunities, and we are excited to see where they decide to go. Next slide, please. The Gen 1 House at the University of Cincinnati offers a living learning community to first-generation college students and helps fund their housing expenses, which can often be cost-prohibitive to students. Each year, a majority of the spots are flagged exclusively for Cincinnati Public School graduates. This year, of the 22 spots they had, 19 were offered to Cincinnati Public students. And we have 18 students that have accepted to attend the University of Cincinnati and be part of the Gen 1 House. And they represent 12 of our high schools overall. Another achievement in this space is that this was the first academic year ever that we have had an applicant from every single Cincinnati Public High School for this program. The commitments don't only live in Ohio, though. We have partners in Kentucky that are eager to partner with our district and with our students. Northern Kentucky University has deepened their commitment to Cincinnati Public Schools this year by earmarking Educational Diversity Awards for Cincinnati Public School graduates. 11 of our students were offered these generous scholarships, and to date, 5 students have accepted the award from 5 different high schools. These students also have until June 1st to accept the award. And Eastern Kentucky University has committed to 2 New Horizon full cost of attendance scholarships to CPS graduates. Because they are still in the process of alerting students of these awards, I am not able to celebrate who those students are yet, but I look forward to being able to bring you those names in the future, and we are thrilled that the commitments go outside of the greater Cincinnati region. Next slide, please. I also want to make sure we celebrate our accelerators and our pipeline programs. We are proud to be a partner with UC Early IT College Pipeline Program, and it serves 3 of our schools. And next academic year, next graduating class, we will have the first official cohort graduating. However, this year we have 3 students that accelerated through the program because they were committed to IT as a career. 2 students from Hughes, Grant Chappell and Zion Avery, and 1 student from Clark, Avery Ingram, will join the UC IT Bachelor's Program in the fall and have their entire freshman year of courses already completed. Next slide, please. Because this is really about students, I think it's really important that we do our best in this time and in remote meetings to make sure that we do some diligence to bring you student voice. And so I wanted to celebrate just a couple of our students, and we asked them for some quotes about what these scholarship programs mean to them. Paco NDI shared that the Ohio State Young Scholars Program and being a scholar has given her the ability to be part of a new community and a new type of supportive family. Cecilia Carter shared how much the Gen 1 house is going to help her and allow her to access her dream of being a college graduate. She'll be the first in her family to graduate college. And Gloria Stanford said it feels amazing to know that someone out there believes in you, and that receiving the Gen 1 award really showed her that. These programs are a mark of the collaborative efforts we have built with our college partners. And in a time where education is a landscape that's changing deeply, we have been able to work with our college campus partners to showcase everything a CPS graduate will bring to their campus communities, and then receive commitments from these partners to invest in Cincinnati Public Schools. Each of these specific partnerships are meaningful because the colleges and universities are saying that our students matter, our students are influencers, and our students are critical to the fabric of their community. And outside of these programs and these students, there will certainly be others that earn scholarship money, and certainly more that will matriculate to college successfully. But these partnerships and other partnerships we have represent a large financial commitment outside of our district to our students and our students alone. And it is in this partnership that we create space for these types of things to be done and for students to get what they need and deserve from their college experience. Next slide, please. Which is why I'm so happy to announce that we'll be adding another scholarship partner to our fold. Chatfield College has committed to the creation of the Chatfield College Achievement Grant. They will join the ranks of Cincinnati State, Gateway Community and Technical College, and the University of Cincinnati in the creation of a final dollar scholarship commitment to Cincinnati Public School graduates. This means that for any eligible student, they will receive a full financial aid package that covers tuition, fees, and books. This partnership marks the first private college commitment to final dollar awards for Cincinnati Public School graduates. And not only does it start for this year's graduates, they were willing to look backwards and make sure that this supported class of 2018 and beyond. So in closing, I just want you to know that this work continues regardless of our current situation. We continue to partner with our colleges and expect that scholarship commitments will continue to grow as we have exciting partnership meetings in this time. All of the work is about changing the narrative to ensure that our graduates are college ready, but that our college campuses are also student ready. So thank you so much for your time today, and I believe Assistant Superintendent Murphy and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Rickles. We'll start Mr. Morosky, followed by Ms. Bowers.
First of all, thank you, Assistant Superintendent Murphy and Ms. Rickles. That was great. I turned my video off so that Katie could watch the valedictorian and salutatorian video with me. It's always one of my favorite parts, and Katie never gets to see these things because she's not at the meetings with us. Kayla, I think you were saying it was Gloria's quote said she felt great that somebody believed in her. And when her picture came up before during the presentation, the slideshow, Katie, my wife, said that young woman looks like she's going to be in charge of something someday. And so if she's out there listening, my wife, Katie Morosky, when she heard that quote, said, "I believe in you too, Gloria." So I wanted to say that. And I also wanted to say that Kayla Rickles, for folks that don't know, I'm out in the community full time in my day job. And I was out the president at Chatfield College, and unsolicited, I was there doing stuff on behalf of my work. And unsolicited, he said, "You're on that school board, aren't you?" I said, "I am." And he said, "I got to tell you, Kayla Rickles has revolutionized our partnership with the district." And that was before this was solid. And I know, Kayla, I passed it on to you, but I want everyone else to know that she is out there representing us well. And your mantra of making sure the colleges are ready for our kids gets me every single time you say it, because that is a completely different way to look at this that is lost in many of these types of partnerships. And so all the kudos and more for you. And the only question I have is, and I would like to be helpful if I could be, it's just glaringly obvious that my alma mater, Xavier, is not on the list. And NKU and EKU, and maybe they don't want to be on the list. And that's would be disappointing. I'm just curious, if do we reach out to them, or do they care?
We did have a conversation with Xavier this past spring, late February, early March. President Graham is very much interested in partnering with us. I know that he is moving on in his life, but he had other really key people at the table meeting with us. Superintendent Mitchell was at that table with Kayla and myself, and we plan to continue that conversation.
Well, that's great. It makes me happy to hear. I know they talk a lot about diversifying their campus, and it'd just be nice to see them partner. All right, I'll stop talking. Thank you all so much for having. Yeah, Eve said, "Stop talking."
Okay. All right, Ms. Bowers.
I just want to thank you, ladies, for I get so excited about graduation. I'm on the same high wave as the superintendent. Graduations, I'm probably about to start crying just thinking about them, because I have my own graduate, but every year, this just really makes me so excited about the possibilities of our students. Having been a former Chatfield College instructor, I know the importance of the college being ready for our students. And I just want to commend you guys, Kayla, especially for making that connection. One of the things that I do have a question about is the recipients of our scholarships for the various colleges. Is there any way to stay connected with those students for them to give information about how they're doing once they leave? I know it's hard to track everybody, where everybody goes as far as the 3E pathways. I know that's very difficult. But and specific to our scholarship recipients, because I know that there have been some students who have gone to Miami and have struggled, who were on the scholarship of the Bridge program, and they have struggled and have not been able to sustain, just because it's different and supports are different for them sometimes when they go to school versus the majority of the group who may be at that school. But I know that's not our responsibility, but just to give us feedback as to how they're doing. Is there any way to kind of maybe ask or try to see if they can stay connected? Because it would be helpful to know not only did they get there, but even if they just, finished and succeeded, and how was it for them?
Yeah, so on the, as it relates to the scholarship recipients themselves, I would say that happens just by nature of the relationship. And so we do some tracking. And Miami is a great example, Board Member Bowers, of a program where we monitor pretty closely and we work with Miami pretty closely about how those students are doing, why they are struggling, and how we can continue to build a better infrastructure of support. And I think that it's a great idea for us to think about how we expand that out to all of our other partners. Most of these partners, because the partnerships are so new, we may not have had yet, but we expect that to build. And then we're also looking at the macro level, partnering with all of these campuses around how how CPS students do broadly when they attend those campuses, because the scholarship students are important, but all of our students are important as well. And so understanding what campuses are good stewards to our students is really important to us as we grow this work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Bolton?
Yes, thank you very much. As always, I cried. So it must have been a great year with all the tribulations these kids have had. But boy, very impressive. A couple things. I would have said swoop twice. So swoop, swoop. So that everybody could hear that. Also, there was also a future Fighting Scot from the College of Worcester, and my best to her. It's a great school. It's my alma mater, and I'm thrilled to see, and I don't know if we can attribute this to the network that the superintendent has built or the work that Kayla has done, but it seemed like there were a wider range of colleges and universities. Thrilled to see our kids stay within our wonderful state and our wonderful community, but also really good to see out, whether it's Stanford or whether it was College of Worcester or University of Virginia. There was a lot more variety than I've recalled in the last several years. So I think that's great. I would also just like to say that I think this is part of the winning strategy in all of the things we do. It's not necessarily just building these partnerships, but actually creating a network of partnerships. And I hope to see I know it's the vision of the superintendent and the assistant superintendent to expand regionally that network. I know people really want our kids that are the college people and university people in Indiana. A lot of interest in Kentucky to get our kids there. And in a lot of these smaller liberal arts schools too, they're on the hunt for making sure they have an appropriate, diverse, student freshman class coming in. So hats off to this. And if there's a way we can press this, and again, it's so important for people to see this as part of the image of Cincinnati Public too. So great leadership, great thinking, very, very visionary. I appreciate it. And swoop, swoop.
Thank you. And seeing no other hands, what I will say in closing is this superintendent, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the work that's being done is not attributed to me. This is Kayla's work, and she has done a phenomenal job. And she listed some of the schools and the money that our kids are getting. But by the time it's all over and said and done in August, there will literally be millions of dollars that our kids will receive in scholarships. So what you saw tonight is just a little tiny bit, but this is Kayla's work, and so she should get the credit.
Good. Nice job, Kayla.
Okay.
Thank you.
So then in closing, I think we should just take a moment to applaud Kayla and all the efforts that she's given to this project. Personally, I can certainly see the growth over the past years in terms of, as Ms. Bolton referenced, the partnership. So congratulations on that. I also want to close out with a message for the young people. This really, like the superintendent, this is one of my favorite things that happens in the year and at the board meetings. And it touches my heart to see their faces and the big smiles that they have. And I will say to them, you've done well to our students. You've done well. And you've made your mark coming out of high school, and you are a resilient group, and you will do great things. And on behalf of the board, I am so proud of what our graduates have accomplished and our vows and sals. We look forward to hearing from you and all the great things that your path has laid out for you. So congratulations to all of you. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Anything else then? All right, before the tears start, so we'll move on to our next presentation with Ms. Wagner.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. I too love this time of year because for me, it's so easy to get lost in the dollars and the cents and fighting over budgets and all that kind of stuff. It's really nice to be reminded why we do what we do. And so thank you, Kayla. That was awesome. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. So today's presentation isn't really a budget hearing, but just kind of an update on the current state of our economics and where we are in the process of redesigning a budget. I first wanted to start with some positive news. We received information about the CARES Act. We did receive our allocation. Well, we haven't received the money yet, but we received information about the allocation on May 4th at $23.6 million. And then the non-public share of that is close to $5.5 million. So we'll receive and be able to use $18 million. And there was a correction to the documentation that I had received in terms of the spending window doesn't end September 2020. We have until 2022. And so that makes it a little bit easier for us to react to and use the money wisely. But it goes along with all of our federal programs where we pay for things and then we seek reimbursement on a monthly basis through the CCIP, which is the state portal where we handle our federal and state grants. Now, so early in the week, I prepared this slide with some the latest economic news. And as you might imagine, the news changes daily. But on May 4th, we were informed by a news conference that the Hamilton County Treasurer is delaying the property tax bills, typically due in June. They're going to be due in July, which doesn't have a huge impact on us for this year because we don't typically receive property tax revenues in May and June, but we do get about $136 million in July. So if that gets delayed too late, or if it's reduced because of tax delinquencies, it could have an impact on us. And we'll stay monitoring it. We'll keep you informed. In terms of the state foundation payments, I had heard last week on our large city treasurer's call through backdoor channels that our last payment of this year from the state was probably going to be reduced, but they didn't know how much that was going to be. And then yesterday we found out that it was going to be big, and today we got more news, so I'll share that in just a second. But in addition to that, the Auditor of the State of Ohio has been sharing information. We're trying to monitor all these different economic channels to get the most recent information. But as you can see, state revenues are suffering, local revenues are suffering. The Auditor of the State Roundtable said that it would be a good benchmark to take a 20% reduction, but he was talking generally across the state. So don't panic over K-12. But then I also saw just a couple days ago that the April unemployment rate was at 16%, but they're expecting a national average at 14%, which, if you recall, we haven't seen these rates since the 1940s. So here's the breaking news from yesterday. At 2 o'clock yesterday, Governor DeWine announced severe budget cuts for the current budget, the current fiscal year of the state budget, and that they would in fact be cutting K-12 education. We had heard from the Auditor of the State that the K-12 cuts would not be likely just 2 days ago. So you can see this changes very quickly. But the cut to the K-12 education across the state is expected to be $354.6 million. And then today at 10 o'clock, they released the district by district allocations or reductions. And we're facing an $8.7 million cut just this year, which will reduce our revenues and then, of course, have an impact on our year-end cash balance. Now, we are fairly fortunate that we started the year with a healthy cash balance, but all these things combined add concern. So if you recall, it used to be when I first became the treasurer, the balance between state and local revenues was 45, 46, and it was closer to being equal. two things have changed. We added another levy, the $48 million levy, and so the state percent of the whole of our general fund operating changed. But also, because of the state budget, and they froze our revenues for 2 years based on last year's, because our revenues aren't growing, the state portion is shrinking. So we're actually looking at 39%, even though our state share is at 47% on their funding formula. So what does that mean to our cash impact? And like I said, this is very fluid. It changes daily, and it just depends on how much we can control our spending and what revenues we can collect. We are seeing a small delay in pilot payments in terms of those collections. But if you recall, in the November 2019 forecast, we forecasted a positive cash flow through the end of fiscal year 23. And that's even when the state froze our revenues. So despite our enrollment increasing, we're not getting more money for new kids, but we have to spend more money to educate them. So that's already putting a pressure on our budget that's difficult to deal with. So as of today, with the state funding reduction of 8.7 and expected property tax collections that are delayed, if we assume there's a 4% reduction in property taxes and state funding for next year and offset by the CARES Act help, if our expenses are allowed to grow at 3%, then we're going to hit that cash deficit a year early. If all those reductions happen and we're able to not increase our expenses, in other words, hold our budget target flat, then we can delay that cash deficit into the following year. So we are working on the forecast right now, and we'll be presenting in a couple weeks for approval and filing. I have a call tomorrow morning with the city treasurers and Aaron Roush from the Ohio Department of Education. He's going to walk us through the reasoning behind the funding formula cuts, and we're pressing him on whether the charter schools will be also cut. So it wouldn't be fair to cut just the districts and not the charter schools that through the tuition deductions. So in fact, we've revised our timeline. So we're revisiting the draft budget that was built off of things that we knew about before March 1. We're working in May on the recovery plan. How are we going to bring people back to work in a safe manner? And then once again, the 5-year forecast has to be adopted and filed by the end of May. And then in June is when we're hoping to finalize what that new normal plan might look like just for that year. It might be a multi-year thing. We don't know yet. But by the end of June, we have to do our temporary appropriation, the 90 days, buy us some more time to figure out what the forecast, the financial budget, and all that kind of stuff looks like to start the year. And then hopefully in August is when we'll start re-engaging in public hearings on what the new budget's going to look like, and then get an amended appropriation by the September 30th. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Ms. Bolton, followed by Mr. Messer and Mr. Lindy.
Yeah, Jennifer, thank you. And thanks for staying on top of this. And it's important, obviously, too, that we all are kind of saying the same message and understand, at least at some level, some general parts of this. Could you explain a little bit more about the money we're losing for this FY20 versus the money that we are losing for FY21? I mean, I think that's a real, if I'm understanding that, they're taking money away that we'd already budgeted and thought was in our treasury, so to speak, and then also influencing what we develop for the coming year. How much you've said something about the 8 point something or other. Is that just this year? And then is there additional losses to the next FY?
So the 8.7 million this year, and it was rumored, but not, it was totally unexpected formally. And it will hit they'll probably spread it out over the last couple of foundation payments or just chop off the last one that we get. So yes, we had budgeted for it. which means our revenue, we're losing $8.7 million in this year's revenues, which, the cash balance that we have, we'll have to replace that unless we can reduce more spending. We don't know what's going to happen next year. We're kind of hoping to get some hints tomorrow about what they plan to do with the state foundation formula, because next year was supposed to be the second year of the frozen revenues. And so if they're already cutting back on that, we don't really know. But 4% reduction at first sounded huge. A 4% reduction in our budget is like a $40 million cut, which would be very, very painful for us. But we don't know yet. So as more information comes out, we'll certainly keep you updated, and we'll keep revising the forecast as necessary. But that's why I wanted the 90-day appropriation to buy us some time to figure out how to react to it.
If I could
was
follow
that
up,
answer all your questions?
Yeah, but if I could just follow up, then you're anticipating for next year's budget too, that kind of significant cut, as well as having less cash carryover for the start next year.
Yes, because the state, as big as the state's cut is making, it's only March, April, May, and June of people's lost income that's driving the cuts in the state budget, right? If those layoffs and furloughs last any longer, next year's budget is going to be even more dramatic. You recall, I projected that we would feel it in a secondary manner because we rely on the state income taxes and the property taxes. We were very fortunate in not having to furlough and lay off people at that time.
And then I promise I'll be done. Then really one of your comments too was to make sure that we have to be watching not just the cash carryover, so to speak, but also we have an issue if we spend such a significant amount of money, even as we had hoped we might be able to, or still might be planning to do. That would get us a year, might help us a year without having a deficit, right? So spending is also part of this. Okay.
Yes, and if you remember, the CARES Act was introduced as to help us cover the increased cost of all this other supplies. But what is happening, what we're going to have to use it for is to help us cover the reduction. But $18 million isn't going to cover $40 million in reductions, right? So it's an unfortunate story, but that's where we are today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Messer, followed by Mr. Lindy, and then Ms. Bates.
Yeah, and mine is more of a comment just saying thanks to Jen for, as Board Member Bates said, staying on top of this. And, I think to the public listening into this, it's the reality that we're all living in today, where obviously we can't control the pandemic, but we definitely can't control what's happening at the State House. And, to your point, things seem to be changing by the minute. And in addition to these funding challenges, we don't know what expectations are going to be on to us that could be even more expensive in whatever they decide to tell us we have to do with our students. And I know all of us have gotten the article that came out yesterday morning, I think it was, talking about the 2-day school week for kids and all. I mean, the point is we are kind of at the liberty or not, I mean, we just have to sit and wait on some of these things. And so my question is, what can we do from an advocacy standpoint to really show the impact here? And, the percentage, while it's low, to your point, I was calculating up in my head when you were giving percentages, like these are tens of millions of dollars. And so is there anything we can be doing through our community to ensure that we're getting that voice to Columbus as these decisions are being finalized, and hopefully get it to change back as it has already changed in these past couple of days? So maybe we can talk about that in Board Matters, but I just think that we've got to get ahead of this as a community,
right?
Because this is serious impact to our children.
Yeah, and Cincinnati suffers more than the other urbans do because we have the lowest state share of all the other urban districts. And so instead of relying on property wealth to do calculations, we need the legislature to start funding growth and strategic initiatives that are successful, and that'll help us get more funding rather than, doing things the old way that's been ruled unconstitutional 4 times.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Messer. Mr. Lindy, followed by Ms. Bates.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. I just wanted to say, Jen, I thought the presentation made a ton of sense and was very helpful, particularly the spot at the end that kind of sized the bottom line for us. And I want to say thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you. It's always hard to make those things put in a slide there because they're complicated and they move. But thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think I'll just speak for myself. I certainly understand that things will continue to evolve, and I just appreciate your hard work.
Ms. Bates?
Yes, I wanted to, well, this will address in part what Mr. Messer asked prior, but you all have before you a resolution that I will be presenting for first reading. And later in the agenda, there's a report that I'm in part going to be giving on the webinars from the Council of Great City Schools. Most of the urban districts in this country can't afford a lobbyist at the federal level. Maybe the New Yorks and the Chicagos can, but most of us can't. So we rely on the Council of Great City Schools to do this for us. And so what's underway is a lobbying program, and I can go into this a little more in depth when at the appropriate time on the agenda. I am on the agenda a little later on, and also when we consider this resolution. First, the superintendent signed off on a letter requesting help, that $13 billion for all the districts across the country. And one of the iterations of the stimulus bills didn't go very far. We saw that with Jen's presentation. We need a bill that puts education at the top, and that's what the Council of Great City Schools and its member districts are advocating. Because let's face it, the state doesn't have the money. We can argue, that it's unfair. They just don't have the money. They're not collecting taxes until July, for goodness sakes. So we have to, the reliance on the federal government is real for our school districts, especially our urban school districts. So we can go into this a little bit more in depth later, but I do want to kind of put before you, before I bring forward the first reading of the resolution, unless there are significant changes, I would advocate even going for a 48-hour waiver and passing it today, because then we can go to our coalition. I've already run this by Ms. Sellers to ask for support in writing from CFT. There will be a levy meeting on Friday, and with the board's support, I would go to all of our member supporters, community support, to ask them to sign on to a letter as well. So this is something that we can do, and that's the most logical place right now for some additional significant funding is the federal government, not the state government at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Bates. And actually, I had it written in my notes to ask or to make a recommendation that we do the 48-hour waiver on the resolution instead of the first reading. So thank you for raising that point.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Wagner. And this will be on the website. The presentation will be on the website. Ms. Wagner.
Yes, I sent it to Ms. Boyle, so we'll ask her to post it for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so moving on, we don't have any specific board matters issues on the agenda today. However, maybe under inquiries and updates, I know there were some things kind of floating around in different conversations, and So if there are any questions or inquiries or things about some of the communication or the questions that people had, let's do that under inquiries and updates, if that's okay. Okay, so let's move on to the resolutions. I need a motion to do I need a motion for a 48-hour waiver on this resolution being presented by Ms. Bates.
So moved.
I need a motion for a 48-hour waiver.
I move that we have entertain a 48-hour waiver so that the resolution in support of additional federal education funding can be presented this evening.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second, sorry.
Thank you. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Ms. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes. Thank you. Ms. Bates, would you please present the resolution?
Yes, I have a resolution in support of additional federal education funding for our nation's public schools. I present this resolution as written for adoption.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Oh, can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ms. Bates,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say that the urban districts that make up the Council of Great City Schools are all being asked to consider this resolution, and this parallels the superintendent's letter. So it's part of a strategy to move the federal government in support of significant stimulus funding to support and stabilize our public schools.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll. I'm sorry, Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, thank you. Real quickly, I appreciate this being introduced. I appreciate this being introduced, and I think it's needed, and especially for the urban districts, but also there's a parallel effort being done by National School Board Association, although it's a wider range of districts. And, you know, we probably have some help in the House for some obvious reasons, but really the only hope I think we have of changing any of this is the Senate Education Committee, that it still has two very pro-education chairs and co-chairs. But the reality is, for our 5-year forecast, we have to be watching the national elections very closely, or we're not going to be able to have the kinds of funds that we're going to need. So this is an uphill battle, and now that there's such an effort to try to reopen everything, I'm hoping that they won't lose the stimulus piece of this, and especially for schools and education and all of the public sector, because apparently the majority in the Senate is not particularly interested in stimulus for public entities or local or state schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Point well taken. Yes, any other questions or comments? Okay, Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes. Thank you. Motion carries. All righty, so I need a motion for 48-hour waiver on the next resolution in consideration.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Yes, Ms. Bolton.
It would be great if administration might be able to explain this, especially for the public, because this is something very
Can
different.
I read it?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, however you want to do it, but I do think it needs
really
to be
want to read
explained.
it.
Okay.
I want to read it. I would like to read it in its entirety.
Hold on.
Read it.
Hold on. First, let's pass the 48-hour waiver, and then we'll get into the presentation of the motion, okay? Is that okay?
Cool.
All right.
Great.
So it has, and I forgot who seconded the waiver
Ryan.
request.
Ryan
Professor did.
All right, Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates,
Aye.
Ms. Bolton,
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers,
Aye.
Mr. Lindy,
Yes.
Mr. Messer,
Aye.
Mr. Morosky,
Yes.
President Jones.
Yes, thank you. So, Ms. Bowers, if you could present the motion for consideration, and then we'll open it up for discussion, for presentation from the superintendent, and then we'll take the vote after that.
Okay, as I said, then my presentation can be read entirely, correct?
Yes, you can.
Okay. A resolution authorizing flexible graduation requirements for the 2019-20 school year. Whereas in response to the COVID-19 health crisis, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine ordered the closure for students of all Ohio K-12 schools from March 16, 2020 to the end of the 2019-20 school year. And whereas in light of the ordered school closure, the Ohio General Assembly recognized the need to ensure that students had a reasonable opportunity to graduate at the end of the 2019-20 school year, and accordingly enacted Ohio Amended Substitute House Bill 197, which permits school districts to adopt more flexible graduation requirements. And whereas the flexible graduation standards apply to any student who has enrolled in the 12th grade in the 2019-20 school year or was on track to graduate in the 2019 through 20 school year, as determined by the school district, but not yet completed the requirements for receiving a high school diploma under the Ohio Revised Code or the school district's requirements. And whereas notwithstanding the state or school district's graduation requirement, Ohio Amended Substitute House Bill 197 gives the school district the authority to grant a high school diploma to such a student if the school principal, in consultation with teachers and counselors, reviews the student's progress toward meeting the requirements for a diploma and determines that the student has successfully completed the curriculum in the student's high school or the individualized education program developed for the student. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education adopts the flexible graduation standards prescribed by Ohio Amended Substitute House Bill 197 and authorizes school principals to grant high school diplomas to students who were on track to graduate in 2019 through 20 and have completed the minimal Ohio school credit requirements. High school diplomas may be granted to students who have obtained the state minimum of 20 high school credits in the following courses: English Language Arts, 4 credits; Health, half credit; Mathematics, 4 credits; Physical Education, half credit; Science, 3 credits; Social Studies, 3 credits; Electives, 5 credits. I present this resolution as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so discussion. And we want to share the information as recommended by Ms. Bolton. So I am asking Superintendent, will that be you or one of your team members?
Sure. Dan Hoying, if you're on the line, if there's anything that I leave out, please feel free to jump in. Yeah, so this resolution allows the school district to be able to graduate students who have the 20 credit hours they've earned them over the course of their time in high school. Considering that there's a waiver for the state testing, in which that was a requirement prior to this happening, the COVID-19 happening, that you had to meet the requirements in terms of a state test, or have a remediation-free score on the ACT. And so this allows us to be able to graduate our kids if they've earned the credits, and the teachers and principal have agreed that they've met all the requirements outlined in this resolution.
Okay, Mr. Hoying, are you good? Did you thumbs up?
Yes, I have nothing to add. That's a good explanation.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. I think we did second. I'm sorry. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers? Mrs.
Ms.
Bowers, you're on mute.
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Aye.
President Jones?
Yes. Thank you. Motion carries. Wonderful. Two huge resolutions, and appreciate the work on this. Again, this sort of is telling us a lot about what the status is of things right now. So those two things needed to be approved tonight. Thank you. Okay, Superintendent Mitchell, please introduce. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Moving too fast. Superintendent Mitchell, do you have a report?
I do. I have two very short reports. The first one is, it would be remiss of me not to mention that this week is Teacher Appreciation Week. And so we're very excited to be able to celebrate our teachers. You know that we have some of the absolute best teachers, not just in Cincinnati or in the state of Ohio, but across the country. Our teachers are dedicated. They come to work every day trying to make sure that the needs of our kids are met, as well as holding high expectations for our young people. And they work tirelessly to provide a great education for our kids, sometimes neglecting their own children. And so it's just tonight that we salute them and we say thank you for all that they do. You can go to the next slide, Sarah or Krista. We are really passionate about this because our teachers, we believe, are the most important people in our district in terms of having an impact for our students. And you can see these are examples of our teachers working with kids, and they go over and beyond. What the teachers have been able to do during this time that our kids are not in school has been incredible. From the Google Meet sessions to the homework lines, to calling them, to emailing them, to posting videos for them on lessons, and also related to social and emotional learning. Our teachers have really gone over and beyond the call of duty to ensure that our kids are meeting with academic success. So as I think about what are the three key messages that are centered around teacher appreciation, it's important to recognize that our teachers, pre-K through 12th grade, they're preparing our kids for a career, for life beyond CPS, and so their work is so critically important. And in that preparation, of course, they have a huge part of their work has to do with academic success, not just achievement, but also performance. And then there's the safe learning environment that our teachers provide for our kids. And it's important for parents and everyone to know that the kids are safe at school, which then allows them to be able to learn. So again, we celebrate and salute our teachers. If you want to have some really feel-good time, I invite you to go on the CPS Facebook page, where you can see many of the videos that our teachers have produced, and it is heartwarming to see how much they care about our kids and how much they dedicate themselves, their lives to the success of our young people. So again, teachers, we thank you for all that you do on behalf of our kids. And lastly, I'd like to highlight the fact that the Hawkins Award Educator of the Year will be announced tomorrow. This is an award that has been given for many years, and we're very excited that we'll be able to announce the winner. There are 20 people who are being recognized, and out of these 20 people, Western Southern has selected one to be the Hawkins Award winner for 2020. So again, a salute to all of our hardworking teachers. We appreciate you, we adore you, we love you. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The second really quick update that I wanted to provide for the board this evening, and Sarah Trimble Oliver and I are going to tag team this. So this is really centered around the fact that a couple of weeks ago, a couple board meetings ago, we really talked about what does the plan look like in terms of coming back to CPS in terms of our buildings. And so we made a pivot several weeks ago from crisis to recovery to the future. And so in no way, shape, or form are we trying to get ahead of the board, but we do want to make sure that we are ready for school when those buildings open in the fall. And that sounds like that's a really far time away, but actually it's only 3 months away. And so in order for us to be ready, we had to do some planning. And so we really set our work in the context of ready, set, go. So what does go look like for our district? We also grounded our work in terms of our recovery, which is what I'm going to talk about tonight, in research centered around the change process. And so as we look at making sure that we are ready in terms of recovery to open, we centered our work in Harvard's work around technical and adaptive challenges and changes. And so there are some very technical aspects of the work, training that people have to have, things that have to learn, getting information, but there's also an adaptive part of the work. And the adaptive piece is the piece that the board really pushed us on several weeks ago to say that we're not coming back in a state that's recovery. Initially, that's the case for operation, but we need to have a mindset shift. And so that's the adaptive component of it. And so we have recognized that our system has been disrupted, and we're going to take advantage of that disruption to retool how we do our work moving forward. So in the change process, we're looking at creating that sense of urgency, putting together a guiding team. And on that team, we identified that there are 3 key roles that we need on this guiding team. We need people who are inventors, people who have a vision for the future, for something beyond what we currently see. And then we have crafters. And those are people who can take a vision and say, is this feasible? Can this actually happen? Can we make it work? And then you have the engineers who are actually designing the execution. So they are saying, this is exactly how we'll do it. This is exactly how we'll manage the work. So key is the vision around an overall strategy. So that's the ready piece. That is really centered around, let's make sure that our people are prepared. So we can't just put a recovery plan on paper and say, okay, here you go, let's execute. So it's making sure that people are prepared. And again, there's a technical aspect to it, and there's also an adaptive aspect. And there's a communication piece that we really need as we create buy-in for our recovery. And when we talk about our communication, we're thinking of our communication should always be in at least one of these lenses. Either we're seeking to motivate people, inform people, educate, or elevate. And in some communication options, we're doing more than one of those things. And so you will start to hear and see our language shift from crisis to recovery to the future. So CPS United, that was crisis. And so we're working on what's our next message that's related to recovery and to the future, along with our hashtag. The big piece we want to make sure that we do is that we are empowering people before we say go. And that's the third phase of the work. And so go is to initiate, And then, so you can see the other 3 steps in our change process in terms of we need to be able to create some quick early wins right out the gate. And part of that is helping people know what's expected of them. I believe that board member Messer said if there's any time right now that people need to know what's expected of them in this crisis, in this uncertain world, right now is the time. And so we're really working with our staff and hearing from them so that they know what is expected of them. We also need to make sure that people have the materials and the equipment to do the job. And that's really critically important as well as we think about recovery. So as we've thought about the early quick wins, we also said, you know what, before we press go, what are the 10 indicators that must be in place to say that we are truly ready to go so that we don't set people up for failure and so that we don't bring people back in a situation in which they're fearful. And so there's a lot of work that we're doing to be able to engage our employees, our families, our partners to say, what makes you afraid about coming back? And that's something that we need to be really serious about and really hear from people because it's real. And then what are your biggest hopes and dreams about a future and coming back into our buildings? And so we're grounding our work in being able to dismantle and tear down the barriers that promote people being fearful and be able to give them a sense of comfort and confidence that there's hope in our future and we have to work together to make it happen. So building momentum and then building this new culture, all of these things, ready, set, go, will all happen before we turn on that light switch that says we are prepared to move forward. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Trimble Oliver, and she's going to talk about the recovery phase of the work.
Good evening, everybody. So 9 days ago, Governor DeWine began announcing the plan to reopen some businesses and organizations in Ohio with some safety requirements. So, for example, at a very high level, requiring face coverings, conducting daily health assessments of employees, hand washing and social distancing, sanitizing, and limiting capacity to 50% of the fire code. So to get more specific, Governor DeWine announced that beginning on May 4th, general office environments may reopen if they can meet these safety requirements for their employees and for their customers or visitors. And on May 12th, consumer retail and services can begin to open if they can meet their safety requirements. So we began looking at these guidelines and requirements and asked ourselves, what does that mean for CPS? And so we have begun putting together a phased recovery plan. And you will see the 3 phases here on the left. We are planning to open central office first, and then school offices, and then, of course, pending the information coming from the governor's office, whole schools in the fall. We will only proceed with these phases, as Ms. Mitchell said, when these 10 safety precautions are in place. So you'll see the first 5 in the list are about the space and about some safety precautions that we'll have in place in the actual buildings. And 6, 7, 8, 9 are about procedures that we will have to have in place for how we will deal with things as they occur when we reopen. And then number 10 is about each department and eventually each school working through how they're going to implement their recovery plans. And an important part of this is that this reopening that we're planning is really more like a dimmer switch and not a light switch. We are still proceeding with remote work when at all possible. So it is a slow reopening. And even those that can't complete their functions remotely, when they are on site, we are implementing a 50% of the normal capacity in line with the governor's guidelines. So what we are planning at this point, we have determined, so we put together a recovery plan team, again, focused on reopening in this order. And what we have determined is that we believe we will be able to open central office for staff on May 18th and for the public on May 26th. We are looking at potentially being able to open school offices in early to mid-June, but still pending being able to meet these 10 safety precautions. So as part of our preparation in this recovery plan, we are paying very close attention to preparing people. So as Ms. Mitchell mentioned earlier, it's very important for us to be communicating to alleviate the fears of people returning to work. So we are aiming to make sure that people are informed. So what does reopening look like? What does that mean for me? What safety precautions are we putting in place to keep our staff safe? And then we're also motivating. What can we bring out of this closure back with us as we reopen to do our work better and faster and more efficiently? So in closing, this recovery plan will continue to evolve as we get new information from the governor's office and the local health departments. I am sure this will not be the last update that we'll be giving you guys.
Thank you, Sarah. So you will be receiving a weekly written memo that gives information about the recovery plan. And we do have a recovery team in place, and is being led by Sarah Trimble Oliver. And it is made up of people from every department at the Ed Center as well as Iowa Street, so that we hear the voices of our employees. Just to give you some cues as to what our thoughts are, a little bit more detail. In order to come to the Ed Center, people will have to wear a mask, and there will be a plexiglass partition between people who are coming into the Ed Center, for example, and there are security who has to check them in. When parents come in, we're working on setting up a system that they can make an appointment so that we aren't overwhelmed at any given time. And then within our customer care center, we'll have plexiglass in between them too. So we have really taken a lot of time to try to think through. Sarah is outstanding with her strategic thinking and her structures and processes to think through every possible thing that we can come up with. And we will be consulting with other people who have done this type of work before from the hospital realm to be able to assist us in this work. And so the real message is that we're taking due diligence to, as Sarah said, turn that dimmer switch on, but making sure that we had everything in place so that people feel safe in order to come back. So that's one team that has already started. And our second team that we have started or will start later this week is one for the future school. And so we have to really start to think about, we only have 3 months before we are opening our schools, whatever that looks like. And so working on the logistics in terms of how will people re-enter the building? What does that mean for transportation and food service and technology and all of those things? So 2 teams so that we can really make sure that one is focused on recovery and that one is focused on the future new way in CPS, and look forward to getting information back from the board through committees, STEP, or however the board decides to do that work. But we just wanted you to know that we're already thinking about it, planning it, and working on it, and love to hear from you and your feedback.
Thank you, Superintendent and Ms. Trimble Oliver. Do board members have questions or comments? Mr. Lindy, Ms. Bolton, did I see your hand? Ms. Bolton, yes, and then Mr. Messer. Mr. Lindy.
Thanks, Carolyn. This question is for Sarah or Laura, but I think my first question is about like our role in making a decision to reopen versus the governor's. And I'm not clear on what the answer to it is, but is it, I can imagine world A where we do and have to do whatever Governor DeWine says around when schools are open or schools are Or I can imagine a world B where if he says you're allowed to open, we can choose whether we reopen or whether we stay closed. Can you help me understand which of those is the right way to think about this?
That definitely would be my understanding as well. And Dan, I don't know if you want to chime in, but that would be my understanding.
Which one, Sarah? I just didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
So we would not be able to reopen until the governor announces that we could. But if the governor announces we can reopen, we still have a lot of flexibility on how we reopen and when. Yeah.
Great. I think that just the reason I was asking was I am very, very worried that just in general across the country, states are reopening too quickly. There is no widespread testing. I do not think we have widespread contact tracing. I am not an epidemiologist by any stretch, but just from the articles that I read and the things I'm listening to, it seems like we're headed for a disaster. And I think it's great if we have the flexibility to make our own decisions about what we feel we can do well and what we can do safely for the people we're responsible for. And so it's really good to hear that, and I'm excited that that's part of the thinking that you all are doing. That was it.
Thank you, Mr. Lindy. Ms. Bolton, followed by Mr. Messer.
Thank you. I want to ditto part of what I think Mr. Lindy's talking about. Let's see. I don't know if it's the same angle, but I am very interested in us maintaining local control of our school districts, as well as also being able to offer as much safety as we possibly can. And I think there is a rush to reopen. And I'm glad to hear that there might be some degree of flexibility as to how we do that. But I will say that the pressure on the governor is going to be so great that, and then on us, that if then the governor opens it early, the pressure on us to open when he says we can open, that this has been so stressful for families. And if the whole economy is opening up, we won't have the benefit of having parents be at home. And that has to come into our consideration. The safety of our children and both coming to school, transporting in a safe way, and being at school. I also worry greatly about the state not only making these financial cuts to us, but then giving us so many mandates that we can't possibly afford. We can't afford doubling up our buses. We can't afford to do the things that they might be insisting. Our kids need to come to school, and we need to have, as best we can, a full complement, and somehow within those walls figure out how we can begin to internally organize ourselves. A meeting of 10? I mean, how many classrooms have only 10 kids? Will there be gym? Probably not, because you're going to be needing to use that space. But all this in the future, I would just hope that we use some of our, and I'm making an assignment, I would hope that we will be using our lobbyists in part to the state to tell us, to make sure that they do not give us mandates that would make it impossible for us to get through the year with a balanced budget. They're already hurting us that way. So I'm concerned about that. I am thrilled that we're moving into the new norm, and it'll take a year or two to do that. But I like the strategic thinking. But I also think we need to be pretty aggressive about advocating for what our children need, whether it's the safety that Mr. Lindy's talking about, or whether it's my angle, which my angle is local control. Because you can tell the suburban districts to do certain things, and you can't tell the urban districts. Within Hamilton County, there's 22 different school districts, and if they want to handle a particular way, let them. So we need that flexibility, and I hope we are lobbying not only to try to get more funds back to us, but we need local flexibility in all of this. But I'm thrilled with the work you're doing, and I'm looking forward to the new norm. This can be wonderful. But we need the flexibility, because Ohio is not famous for innovation or thinking of something new and different. We are. So I want that flexibility. So appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Mr. Messer?
Well, I'll just put 2 exclamation points on everything Ms. Bolton just said. So I'll scratch off the need to be working north,
Yes.
as all of those plans. So I will save all that. The only other thing, I just think this is fantastic strategic thinking, scenario planning. I love separating it out. I love that the triggers are identified. This is absolutely fabulous. And the only thing that I would suggest, if it's not already being done, which it likely is just to have a representative group of our stakeholders and let them be our official pressure testers. And as plans are developed, we run it through that group and say, what are we missing? What would you add? And I would have, a proportionate number of teachers and every representative roles throughout the administration or throughout the district for those positions that touch our children and that would touch this return through a return from where we are today to whatever that next iteration looks like, so that we're kind of catching and even working on positioning things that we're doing and why we're doing it. You might hear a group, well, I don't understand this. This makes no sense. Oh, we better clarify the communication. Yeah, well, let's change how we roll this out because that's a great point. We got to tell the why first or whatever. I just think having a representative group of stakeholders of our frontline people, pressure testing and asking questions can really help us make sure that we've got the right things and thought through all the right perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Superintendent?
Yes. So to Mr. Messer's point, the future team has representation of every role that is in a school.
Love it. Perfect.
So you have parapros, security, teachers, frontline people, so that we can hear from them in terms of logistically how things might work.
And so if you could maybe just add a single working mother, parents that, both work, like run it through those sieves too of just different types of parents. And I think that'd be great. Caregivers. I think that'd be great too, but fabulous.
Okay, Mr. Morosky.
I was going to wait until updates, but I think it's pertinent now. Mr. Messer gets 3 exclamation points from me for that one. And there are, a number of groups around town starting to form about what does Cincinnati look like when it comes back. And many of y'all know this. I know the superintendent does. Co here is convening a bunch of groups. They're not charging for it. They're convening a bunch of groups like for small businesses, education, et cetera. And I've been sitting in on the education ones with Tiana Amat and with Emily Campbell from the district, teachers, Dr. Kimberly Mack from John P. Parker. And one of the mothers that you described, Ryan, with 5 kids in the district is kind of co-chairing with me. The point of all that is that having that with the team, to your point, Mr. Messer, I just wanted to kind of put a spotlight on that. But also it's been great for the deputy. I wouldn't speak for Deputy a lot, but able to get real-time feedback from parents about what do you think about this? What does it look like? And I wanted to share, I've been reading a lot of articles about the future of education, and some seem outlandish, some seem maybe somewhat reasonable, but a lot of them, the theme I keep coming back to, and again, Mr. Messer triggered this in me, are this parent-led idea of, is there a permanent hybrid approach? I don't know. I mean, we all don't know. We're all figuring this out together, but they've been really interesting. And one last thing I would just encourage everyone to do is a 14-year-old girl wrote an op-ed in the New York Times about how she wants to learn in the future. And it got spread around pretty widely. I'm sure a bunch of y'all saw it. If you didn't, you can just go Google New York Times 14-year-old. And it's really interesting. So with that, Ms. Trimble Oliver, Superintendent, I am so impressed. I talk to my colleagues in other government agencies, city, county, whatever, and it's all different, I realize, but I just feel like we have our hands on the steering wheel, maybe a little more firmly, which is great in light of the somewhat depressing news we got earlier about our finances. So thank you.
Ms. Bowers?
I just want clarification, Superintendent Mitchell, regarding the school buildings. If there are any lifts at the end of the month, community partners or people in the community may be interested in using your gyms. I'm assuming that is off the table, but I don't want to assume. That's why I need to ask.
So it's something that we have not discussed. We would have to have all of those safety checks in place to have a comfort level. But another concern, quite honestly, to that is, though, we have to ensure that those schools are clean and that people are out of the buildings so that we can make sure that the cleaning and the sanitizing takes place. And so we've rolled out a staggered time for teachers to come in for a limited amount of time with mask, with temperature check and all of that to get their things straightened up and then get out of the buildings as quickly as possible. What we don't want to do, we want to be very helpful to the community, but what we don't want to do is create an unsafe situation for people in terms of not being able to keep those buildings clean because we have this high traffic area of people coming in and out. And then we don't want to be responsible for people being contaminated, on our grounds in a situation that's not even official necessarily school business. So I think it's something that we can talk about, but we do have grave concerns about letting large numbers of people come into the schools just from the safety aspect of it.
Makes sense.
Okay, thank you. And in closing, I just want to say I appreciate the report that was given, and I agree with everything that everybody has said. And it's interesting because different individuals have sort of a different twist on this. So here's my twist, and that is that you mentioned, Superintendent, that you said earlier you didn't want to get ahead of the board, and I don't feel like you're ahead of us. I think you help us. And I think that there are going to be many times when the board may, or at least me personally, feel like that the board may get ahead of the planning. And I think it's so important. And I've talked to several of the board members and really soaked in some of the comments that people have made about this being very proactive and aggressive. And I agree with that. But I think too, and I was going to talk more about this in inquiries and updates, it's making sure that we align and time our planning around this. I would imagine, and I got this from Ms. Bolton, so I'm going to give her credit for it, that we should have on our agenda every meeting something related to this planning under board matters or through your report. That is so important to stay, and possibly in executive session. So it's so important that we continue to align that way. So again, that's just my twist on it, but thank you again for the report, and Ms. Oliver, thank you. Okay, so I'm sorry. I need a motion to approve the recommendations of the superintendent.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Wagner, please call roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the report of the treasurer?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes, thank you. Okay, inquiries and updates. Ms. Bates, I know you had an update for us.
Yes, and as you know, I've been attending the Zoom meeting with the representatives from the Council of Great City Schools, and they are holding job-alike meetings. So I know that other members of the administration are also attending their meetings with the Council of Great City Schools. There's a couple of things that I wanted to bring you up to date on. And yes, thank you very much for supporting that resolution. And Superintendent Mitchell supported the superintendent's letter as well. So this lobby effort is strong. There are 70 some districts with the Council of Great City Schools. Over 60 superintendents have signed on to the letter, and the boards are approving this resolution. So that's a strong statement. Couple of things on that. At the beginning of the meeting last Friday, the first item that was mentioned with regard to federal funding and the next stimulus funding act is that the most instrumental legislator in the authorization of additional stimulus money is Senator Portman, and called on Cincinnati to assist with contacting the senator. And it just so happened that there was a phone meeting set up with Senator Portman's office on Monday morning at 11:30. So we were able to connect our lobbyists and Krista Boyle and I think maybe Dan to the lobbyist from the Council of Great City Schools, Jeff Siemerding, for some messaging to assist on the call, which I'm sure helped the effort. Hopefully it did. And the other part of that is that they recommended, there was a recommendation from the lobbyist and from Michael Casserly that once we approve the resolution, that we get a coalition letter of support. So CFT, I mentioned, we could bring it up, Ryan Bennett, at the levy meeting on Friday, but everyone, all the board members have connections with community groups. So if we can ask them to sign on to the letter and then ask Krista, or have Laura ask Krista to develop a letter of support from the coalition that will accompany the resolution. And that will go a long way. Hopefully we can, get folks like the Chamber on board and CBC. So anybody with their star power with our community organizations, this is the time to use it, because that's part of our hope, is to get this federal stimulus money, because the states are hurting. Now, as far as the state, and I know that our lobbyists are setting up meetings with our local delegation in our state legislature, that the federal government is allowing states to adopt a waiver that would allow states to supplant the federal money with the state money, which means we wouldn't get what Jennifer was telling us is owed us, that federal money, that a like amount would then be put back into the state coffers, and there would be no increase. So we have to make sure that our lobbyists will also advocate that the state legislature not adopt a waiver, because that would hurt all of our school districts. The other issue is, well, there's a lot of discussion about the how to do what Ms. Mitchell gave a broad overview of where we're headed with the reopening of the district and the schools. So we'll be getting more information about what's happening throughout the country that will hopefully help us in some of our work. And also there's urging that we think about a recruitment campaign now for fall enrollment. We're still in business. we're not just surviving, but we're thriving. And this new way of doing business is going to be a great way of doing business. So that was another push to increase enrollment in the public schools and not have people in the community become discouraged because of all that's happening with the COVID-19 and also the gloom and doom around the budget cuts. You know, we will get through this, and we'll do it in a very strong way. And we want our students back, and we want more students from the community to join us. So I'll let you know next week, next Monday, how the call on Friday goes as well.
Thank you. I have several updates, but before I start, does anybody else have any updates they want to mention? Mr. Lindy?
Carolyn, this may be on your list too, but were we going to talk about the reporting on contact logs?
We can. Go ahead. Did you have a question? You're asking if we can get a report on that?
No, Laura sent to the board, by way of follow-up from a previous meeting, a really thorough report on the rate at which kids were being contacted by staff at CPS. I wanted to make sure I said thank you. I wanted to check to make sure I was reading the report correctly, and I wanted to ask some follow-up questions. I wasn't sure the right time to do that. I totally defer to you as to when the right time is, whether that's now or a future meeting, later in this meeting, up to you.
I think it's. I would say it's okay if you have a couple of questions and follow up to that. As I recall, it was presented out, and the administration followed up with providing us the data. So if you have some specific questions and follow up to that, that will be fine. Now I don't know if this is if it's just a couple of questions to update, or do you want a full-fledged discussion? There's been lots of conversations out there about it, so I don't know what direction you want to go. But I would say start with the questions that you have.
Great. Thanks, Carolyn. I appreciate it. Laura, I wanted to say thank you for the follow-up and for the report. I wanted to ask you, what meaning you were making of it, and how you and your team are using it.
So I would say that we know that there are a lot of kids who are still not reached for a variety of reasons, whether they don't have the technology or the Wi-Fi, or we don't have phone numbers. I will honestly say this. I think we knew this before we did this 8-page report. I could tell you, but it was probably a good exercise to prove what we were thinking was true. We obviously know that there are some inequities in the district, whether we're talking about kids who have access, subgroups of young people. And so our future team will be thinking about how we're able to reach more kids in the fall. So, and I would invite Tiana to join in if she has any other insights that she'd like to be able to offer.
Good evening. I echo everything Superintendent Mitchell has shared. The only thing that I have to offer is really engaging our staff when we start working on the future plans of ideas. Right now, we are kind of moving from the recovery stage and have rapid response team at all of our schools that we have identified a need for when it comes to our students. But we want to get better in engaging our families and our students, and we're using that data to do that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Morosky, Ms. Bowers, and I'm sorry, hold on. Is this a direct follow-up to that question, Ben?
It is. Before I knew what feedback I wanted to share, I wanted to ask what the meaning they were making of it and how they were using it. Now that I know that, if I could have 45 seconds, and then I will put it away. So I think I wanted to say thank you for sharing it and collecting it. I think from my perspective, I want to challenge us to prioritize impact and outcomes versus activities. And I think there's a lot of evidence that we do that sometimes, and I'd like to see us do it even more. The thing I can't quite tell is whether we're treating as fixed the number of kids that we can access, or whether we're seeing that as something we can influence. I think it's something we can influence. And so I'd like to see us be able to make contact with an even larger share of kids, and to be aggressive and ambitious about that. The other things that I'm also still interested in, and I don't know if this is information we have, and I've just missed it, or if we don't have it yet, but what share of kids have access to technology and the internet? I learned last week that 95% of kids in the state of Rhode Island have access to a device and internet, and 85% of kids, and maybe it's 90% of kids in Baltimore, have access to a device and internet access. I think we should be able to beat that, and I don't yet know where we are. And so I wanted to, as we go forward in planning for next year, I just wanted to challenge us to be bold and ambitious about the number of kids we can reach, the ways in which we can set them up for learning for next year, and to really go after it.
Board Member Lindy, I would like to say that one of our goals, you challenged us to look at our goals, and we're monitoring the distribution of the devices and the increase of student engagement. So we're making that direct correlation. But our goal for next year is that all kids have devices and connectivity, so we can close this digital divide and move forward with the innovative academic curriculum that they're all deserving of.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Morosky.
Thank you, President Jones. And I brought this up in SAC, and so it's the same issue I brought up. And in light of this specific asking of teachers to log all of this. And the superintendent, I know, is curious if we expect these reports to continue coming. And the feedback I have received, and it's manifold feedback, is the time. This adds about 5 hours to a teacher's week, about an hour a day. And all of this data is readily retrievable through Schoology without teachers having to do it on their own. And so I'm just curious, I'm not certain this was a board directive, and we all give, I respect Mr. Lindy's desire to know this. There's certain things that I've asked for that I want to know. I understand that. I will challenge, and I'm uncertain that this is a reasonable thing to ask teachers to be doing every single week for 5 hours extra, when a lot of them also have their own kids that they're trying to teach. And when what I think we're really trying to get to is 100% of kids are reached, and figuring out what kids we're not reaching, we can figure out all of the other things. I'm all behind with Mr. Lindy with your point of like challenging for the outcomes. I'm all with that. I'm uncertain that this data, and what I think I heard the superintendent say, and I don't need you to respond, but was that this didn't really tell them anything they didn't already know. So I'm just curious if we may have an unintended consequence of putting an undue burden on teachers if we can get this data another way, because it is valuable data to have. I don't disagree with that. I'm just wondering if there's a different way to do it, or a more effective way.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bowers.
I just want to comment. Can you hear me now? I heard Mike and Board Member Morosky and Zach listen to Ben, and also listen to Deputy Superintendent Ahmad, who was on the platform the other day. And I heard some other representatives from their schools kind of flexing their muscles about them having contact with every single one of their students weekly. And I have heard from some families who do not have access to Schoology because they don't have connectivity, So those teachers are not making contacts with them. So that's not an automatic assumption that there's some way to retrieve this information. I know families that don't even have packets from the schools and no way of getting in contact with teacher. And I also know the district is doing this rapid response kind of thing to figure out ways to try to how to engage these families. But there are a high number of students who have not been engaged with learning thus far and who have not done any work or even retrieved the work for whatever obstacles and reasons why. But when I was on the platform the other day in reference to addressing what the school districts are doing to help connect with students, and I hear Winton Woods or I hear some inner city Catholic schools saying that they have connected with all of their students and as part of their teachers, I am not okay with saying that we shouldn't be accountable for at least touching base with a high number of our families, even though we have a lot of barriers within our school district. But that when I hear families say that, no, I haven't spoken to my teacher, we need to find out why that is. And if we're moving into this remote learning for the new school year, having access to internet, there are a lot of barriers to that. But I don't have a problem with a teacher making contact with families weekly and explaining that. But I also like quality, the effectiveness. I mean, what is the quality of the conversation? Not just I called them to make a check, but they need to have some instructional connectedness with the student. And I think that's going to be very important for next school year.
Okay, so Mr. Messer.
Yes,
Mr. Messer.
I think this is a great discussion, and starting out with Mr. Lindy's comments at the beginning, I can assure you there is not a teacher that I have talked with, that I have met, who doesn't want to have 100% of their kids have a contact every week. I don't believe there's an administrator, a school board member, or otherwise who don't want technology in the hands of every child. That is a heavy lift financially. And then in rolling that out, there's a whole nother set that we've had updates on that. And I think that we're on that path. I think that when your kids transfer into the district, man, I think for sure you're going to see like me. Even somebody dedicated and involved, I sometimes forget to respond to that teacher. And I think that and that's our responsibility. Like, we get the things you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to reply and say, yes, we completed these and all this, and get them into the Zooms, and then your kid throws a meltdown, or you're on a work Zoom and you can't show up to the teacher Zoom. It was Olivier getting onto Miss Dessa's class. He said, I don't want to get the coronavirus. I don't want to get on there, because he thinks just being on there, he may get it. But I just think that one of the most important things here, that I love all the things that the rapid response things that the superintendent sent through. Because, again, as I said, there is not an administrator or a teacher at CPS that does not want to have 100% of our kids having been touched and through their lessons and moving forward. I know teachers that I've spent a lot of time with during the family we're quarantining with that is sick about a couple of parents. She knows it's the right phone number. She knows it's the right email. And they will not take her calls and will not respond back. There's only so much we can do. And so as far as what and it's not safe to send them out. And I've heard teachers wanting to go find these kids because they care so much, but that's not good. We can't send people into harm's way. But I do think one thing that we, as far as this rapid response team, we have to get more outwardly focused. And can we connect to these people through their faith-based organizations? Can we connect with these people through their community councils? And, can we be strategic and almost get a peer-to-peer, parent mentors? Hey, I'm going to start checking in with some of my friends and have a campaign of getting parents connected to say, look, just respond. But to me, that is the thing. And as I said to somebody, I was going, Jimmy, did you respond to Miss Duffy for Lillian? Now that's preschool and they're killing it. He's like, I promise I'll do it right now. Well, I said if she needed it yesterday, I hope she didn't get hit because we didn't respond. And I think, and we are engaged. How many times is this multiplied? So I just really feel like we have to do a campaign to really show the importance, maybe peer-to-peer and other community influencers, to really get people, parents specifically, at the table to help, or a loved one, a mentor, a caregiver, somebody else who can help fill that role if they're on the front lines fighting the virus or otherwise. Just my thoughts.
Thank you. I'm going to go with Ms. Bolton first and then Mr. Lindy.
Thank you. I'll go as quickly as I can.
Then we're going to close off of this so we can move on.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Just the 2 things or 3 things, I'm not sure how it'll break down. But one thing is in this idea of connectivity, the network, let's say, that our district has created with certain colleges and universities, it's time to make that kind of connection and create a business network, because it's the businesses that can make the connectivity possible. If you'll recall, several years ago, there was a city council person that tried to have free Wi-Fi happen in any number of neighborhoods, and it was a provider who said, oh no. So if anything can come of this, it would be important for us to make the case that indeed the business providers of the connectivity and whatever else might be part of that is their responsibility. Us, yes, the device, the connectivity, if we come out of this with nothing more than Cincinnati or greater Cincinnati making an absolute commitment to 100% Wi-Fi, I think that would be beneficial. The other thing I'd like to say just on this matter, we are really enamored with the virtual learning, and it's a great opportunity to do all kinds of things that we can't normally do. But as a really old person, I will tell you that in 1973, when I graduated with my little teaching certificate, everyone was telling us there's going to be teacher machines in 5 years. Well, the teacher machines didn't happen, and we've taken 2 generations almost to get to this point, and this is a great tool. But there is simply nothing more beneficial than a child coming to school, being with their classmates, having a relationship with their teachers and their whole support system. So as much as we are now focusing on the new world, and I'm all for it, let's not forget the real value of what has actually been public education. Kids coming together in groups, the diversity, teachers doing what they need to do, relationships, a safe building, and so on. So that's part of the future as well.
Thank you. Mr. Lindy, and then Ms. Bates, and then me, and we're going to close it off. Mr. Lindy?
Sure. I think I just wanted to, I think the thing that feels very important to me is that we're clear on what we want to be true in the pandemic response. That we're clear about, like, here are what our values are. Here's a bold picture of what we want to be true that's measurable for kids and for families in our response. To me, I personally think part of that should be, that kids hear from us and that they recognize they're part of a community of adults that care about them and that they're engaged in meaningful learning. But it could be something different, and I think that should come from Laura and the administration. But like, here's a small set of things that we really believe in, that we think should be true, and that we can measure whether or not we're doing them. And then we check as we go through the plan to see whether or not those things are actually happening. And where we're winning, we celebrate and we learn, and where we're off, we adjust and we learn. And that's the picture I have in my head of where I'd love to see us go. And so everything I've offered in past meetings and this one is in that spirit. And I appreciate the chance to work on that together.
Thank you. Ms. Bates?
Yes, we've done a really good job of getting the word out about the food distribution program that we have. But I know other districts have done this. I've heard this with other urban districts, that there's been a campaign to get students to go to library and school parking lots to access the internet. Now, we don't want a lot of overcrowding in those lots, but I am thinking that perhaps people don't know that that's a place where you can access the internet. And that might be something that we can do, is begin a campaign, especially over the summer, because the kids are going to get summer packets and they're going to need to be able to access the internet to do that. I know even in reading the logs from the customer care center, parents are directed to, the website to get the packets. So if we can urge them to access the internet through the library and through the parking lots of our schools, ensuring that the signal is strong enough, I think that might help break down some of that inequity.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, I'll be brief. I ditto a lot of the comments that have been made and lots of good ideas about how we proceed. But I want to remind board members that we did give this as an assignment through the administration to build in some accountability for increasing contacts. I think that's, what my personal experience has been is that, as many teachers as we have, and God bless them all, we're always going to have some that don't like the things that they have to do. And just like we've heard many of the teachers say they feel like they're working more hours, I've heard teachers who love it. Now, whether or not the superintendent, whether or not it is useful to her and her team to do this robust report, I think that's your decision. Because I think what the board wants to hear is, how are we being accountable to meet that 100% threshold? I don't care. I don't know. This is going to sound really weird. I don't really care how you get there. If we get there, lots of good ideas and what have you, but I don't want to even start to tell you how to do it. I think you will recognize if this report is too much, we don't need it. That's just how I feel about it. But I also am going to share an update about my meeting with the City Council's committee and to talk a little bit about that. Some of it had to do with questions regarding the digital divide. So I'll save it for that. So if we're ready to move on, or if we're ready to move on off this subject, I'll go ahead with that. Okay, so had an invite. Ms. Bolton, quick question.
This is because this is still an update, right? I mean, it's not the same topic. We are still in inquiries and updates?
We're still on inquiries and updates, but I think we beat this horse to death.
Right. Well, this is a different This is a different topic. Yeah. Just to update, because I didn't want to interfere when it was public speaking. I wanted to update that Assistant Superintendent has already held a community meeting with her committee regarding LSDMCs, and she's ahead of the game. So I guess I'm going to make an assignment when we get there that she obviously reach out to that person. But I did want to give her credit for convening a community committee to try to get the LSDMCs on board, and has made some decisions as to how to proceed. So I did want to update for that.
Thank you. Okay, so I had an invite to come and give an update with City Council's Education Committee, and it was a good meeting. There were three main areas that they wanted updates on. One being the technology and Wi-Fi access, the second one being food distribution, and the third one being around the plan for next year. I think what I heard very clearly, very loud, very clearly, and very in a very affirmative way is their interest in their commitment to supporting the district and partnering with the district as much as they can. So with the technology piece, acknowledging that there still is that divide and that we're not making as many contacts with the kids, their question is, well, what can we do to support? So the effort around this is being led, so to speak, by Councilmember Kearney and Councilmember Sittenfeld. The question about what can we do? So they did reach out, had a contact and a preliminary discussion with a person from Spectrum who was willing to have a conversation with the district around providing free access to Wi-Fi. I don't know the sort of the parameters around that because he didn't come to the meeting yesterday, but there's certainly interest on City Council's part to work with us around that. And so, Superintendent, I did send an email. You may not have seen it, but I sent an email with that information on it for your review. Also, what was talked about in that meeting was, and I heard other board members talk about what can we do. I think, Ryan, you talked about connectivity. I know we've connected with business partners, lots of them. And so what I was able to say to them is that, number one, we have some of those contacts, but again, it might be worthy of a conversation with Councilmember Kearney, who, somebody mentioned, can these folks help us get our kids connected to Wi-Fi? It's our community kind of partnerships. So it might be worth that conversation to do that as well. In addition, they asked questions in terms of the future plan, and I gave them just sort of pretty much what you had already shared with us, Superintendent, where we're going with the future plan. There's a lot of interest in community participation in things like mentorship. How can they get involved? There was a suggestion made by Councilmember Sittenfeld that when the schools do open in the fall, that there may be some possibilities to open up the rec centers to use that as educational space. So, again, just worth talking with them about. So they've had a lot of positive things to say, and Councilmember Young suggested, and we hear this all the time, CPS is doing a great job. They praise the teachers. They really praise the paras. They've had some great experiences with the paras. But Councilmember Young was advocating and saying CPS needs to tell its story better and more often. And he says these are the things that we should be getting out in front of, making sure that the public knows, and then looping in the public, because that is a way to loop in the public. So the more we tell our story, the more opportunities we have to partner. So again, it was a good meeting, and I'll leave it at that. So it was a good meeting. Okay. Let me see. Okay, so the only other update that I have is it's really around where we go from here with the upcoming meetings. I've heard clearly that we need to keep certain things on the agenda as standing items. So for every meeting, we should anticipate some discussion around aspects of our plans. And we can decide as we go what we want to do. So just to refresh for people, on the next board meeting, May 6th, I'm sorry, that's today, May 11th, we're supposed to have a planning around or a presentation from the superintendent around the growth planning and enrollment. And that came out of our board work session. So that is a topic that we need to have. But in addition to that, we need to start thinking about, if you recall the last conversation we had at the last meeting where the superintendent was going, we asked the superintendent to provide options for us to look at. And I think she's done some of that already, just in terms of where the planning is now. Now, I put a question mark around the timeline for that, and that question mark means I either needed to get clarity on it, or I haven't talked to the superintendent about when it's appropriate to put it on the calendar. but that is a work in progress. But I think from week to week, as we start to pull the agenda together, I think it's what we can do if board members have ideas or thoughts about what needs to be on the agenda, we have to get it on so that we can begin to align with the plans, if that makes sense to you guys. So I'll stop at that and ask, if board members had any questions or concerns, or if there are things right now that you can identify that we can begin to at least formulate some ideas about how we proceed at our next upcoming meetings. Recognizing too, like we have the budget timeline, the budget hearing timeline, and all that still needs to remain. Okay. So you can always shoot an email or something and send it to Phyllis. We'll make sure it gets on the agenda. Okay. I believe that there was a question about graduations, the process, logistical pieces. Superintendent, can you update us on that?
Yes, so, we had planned graduation parades, and then the governor came back and said no. And then I ended up calling a contact that I have in the governor's office, and he says, you are the 45th superintendent who's called me. I think that was last week. And so now he's saying, yes, we can do that. But the governor is asking that there be no more than 10 people there facilitating this. And so I asked, originally the PLT, we were going to sign up to go to different graduations. I think that the kids would rather see the people who have been working with them. And so I don't want us to take a staff member's spot. And so I've asked the PLT to not go to them. I plan to go and do like a drive-by and wave because I just think it's important for, just to show some support. But they need as many of their school staff there who know the kids celebrating with them. And so we need to lower the number of people who are actually going to be in attendance. The CPD has to be there in full force to help make sure that we keep the distancing and no one gets out of their car. And so we've tried to preserve all the spaces for staff and security and the police to be able to control the crowd.
Okay. And so Superintendent, what do you see as the board's role in this?
Yes, so I know that many times board members love attending, and I do just have a question about, the confirming of the diplomas. But my ask is really is this: if there's another way that we can do that, if we can allow the school staff to take our spots so that the kids see people that they know and have worked with them for the 4 years that they've been in school. So that's just my thought on it. But of course, it's totally a board's decision.
Okay,
Dan,
I see.
Can you weigh in on the conferring of the diplomas, Dan?
In terms of whether or not they can be conferred by a member of the administration?
Instead of the board. Yeah.
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 Can it be done at a board meeting?
Yes,
like total?
Sure. Yeah, we could put together something.
By the 11th, because the first one is on the 18th.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So I saw Ms. Bolton's hand first, and then Mr. Morosky.
Yeah, I so appreciate the judgment of the superintendent saying, let's let the school folks do this as much as we all enjoy it. I do think that you could have at the next meeting the idea of the whole board conferring based upon just the list. It doesn't have to be every name, but the graduates of each of these high schools, and also Aspire and projects, or those folks, and just do it by school. I think that would be legal. Plus, the only other not board member, but staff person I'd really like you to be able to be at these graduations is somebody to videotape the best moments of each. Because I think that would be so cool to let us see how beautiful our children are and are near grown-ups and whatever. But I do think that this could be a fantastic package for us to be able to show later. But I think we should just confirm by school at a board meeting and let the people that love them be there as much as we have to give up what we love to do too.
Great. Mr. Morosky? Mr. Morosky? Okay, he said he's good.
I didn't have any. No, I didn't have. I was just conferring diplomas upon everybody. Never mind. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, ignore me. I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so great, thank you. And I know this is a lot of work, it just to make sure that they get acknowledged in some kind of way. But again, I appreciate the efforts to keep things safe and secure. Okay, any other updates, inquiries or updates? Okay, assignments. Ms. Bolton.
I have two. I have two. One is to have the superintendent follow up with the LSDMC person that contacted us about whatever, and I'm sure she'll give that to Shauna to do. But again, compliments that's already kind of in the works. The other thing is an assignment. It's not really an inquiry. I got a request from one of our audit committee members, Jim Crossett, who said that Childhood Food Solutions can feed CPS kids, but the names and the addresses need to be released. And I know there's ways that you cannot do some of that, but how can we get over that hurdle so that Childhood Food Solutions is able to help us feed the kids and what have you? So I'd like to assign to the superintendent to reach out to Jim and also figure out what the legal restrictions are about them having access to our kids' names and what have you. So it's Crossett, and we've got his number, obviously, and it's also Childhood Food Solutions, with whom I know we've dealt any number of times. So those are my two assignments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Morosky?
Thank you, President Jones. So in light of the data that we do have, I've some of the feedback I've been getting from the community that I was going to put in my log that we're doing, but I figured I'll just do it now, is that our kids with disabilities, kids with IEPs, for hosts of reasons can be difficult to get a hold of and or may not have access. So I guess if I were to try to wrap that assignment up and tie it up with a bow, it would be if we could identify that subset. So I looked at the document that we were talking about earlier. I didn't see that, and so if it's readily available, great. If it's not, I'm certainly not going to ask for a super duper quick turnaround. But if we could identify our students with IEPs, because I spend a lot of time thinking about those kids and the gaps in their education right now, our students with disabilities. And so I guess what I'm asking is, A, do we know who has not had contact and or no devices, and B, how we can get a hold of them as soon as possible?
Yeah, so we do have that.
I'm done. No, you go ahead.
Sorry about that now. We do have that information. It's in a different system, which is why it wasn't a part of the report that I gave you, and I can provide it for you. And to Susan Bunty's benefit, she has been nervous all day that it's not a part of the document that I turned in, and says, Laura, we really do have it, so I will provide that for you. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Thank you. As Susan knows, and anyone who's ever been on SAC with me, best with those IEP kiddos.
Thank you. Any other assignments? Okay.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. I've spoken a lot, but they've been short snippets. I think last time the superintendent asked for some guidance regarding the STEP committee, and I don't think we ever returned to that conversation. And I know when we first talked about the STEP committee, I know there were at least 4 board members that were saying we do want to involve the community. I just would like to make an assignment to our staff, if indeed the board has a will to involve the STEP committee and whatever other members might join, if we can find a time that would be appropriate to convene them in May or early June. So I'd assign that to the board staff and the president to look into that. Because after we talked about that, I got a lot of folks commenting that they did want the STEP to reconvene, and they did want to have an opportunity for the community to be there. But I know the superintendent and administration doesn't need to take it on the role to do it, but we would need her there for that meeting.
Yes.
But not to convene it.
So this, just for clarification, this is a committee meeting. So,
yes.
Right? This is a convening of the committee meeting that includes the STEP folks. So that would be you, Mr. Messer,
and Messer's chair for life.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. All right. Thank you. Will do. All righty.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other assignments? All right. I need a motion to recess into executive session to consider preparations for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees, security matters, and purchase of property for public purpose.
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner. Please call roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes. Thank you. So this ends our regular session, and we'll recess for about 5 minutes, and our live broadcast will end, and we'll begin in 5 minutes. Thank you.